Oh, hi, so Chandra Easton here, esoteric astrologer from starastrologyhealing.com. It's the 16th of October, and I'm going to be using esoteric astrology, talking a little bit about the global shift. You could say it's the global awakening. You could say it's the energy of ascension coming into the planet, rising of consciousness, many things. I've just referred to it as the global shift. A few things I'll talk about. It's just a bit of a timetable, and the timetable I'm looking at is really the unfolding of the outer planets and where they're moving through. I'll talk about Jupiter in Cancer, which will be there for about a year, moved in June 2025 and there till June 2026, and the opportunity that affords us. A little bit about the supposed peace plan in Gaza, and a little bit to do with Pluto in Aquarius and the laws that are coming into place of the global digital identity. Okay, so let's look at the timetable. I prefer to think of it as the Great Awakening, although it's part of the Great Change, because that's what we're hoping, is that humanity awaken. And astrologers, we always look to the heavens to look for the timetable and the timing, such as we can attempt to interpret it on an esoteric level, because space and cosmos is the body for the holy ones, and the planets move in certain rhythms. I'll be talking a little bit here about the rays. If you don't know anything about the rays, well, it's a subject that's vast, that can be explored, and I'll just be mentioning it in passing. So the planet Pluto, which is the farthest out in our solar system, moved into Aquarius on the 22nd of January last year, 2024, and stays there for about 20 years, till about 2044. And the planet Pluto has a transformational energy and holds what we call the first ray from a soul's perspective. So the first ray energy births something new, but it also clears the path of whatever debris has been left behind in order to birth something new. The sign of Aquarius, from the soul's perspective, is the second ray of love and wisdom. So the message that we have for the next 20 years is that we have a transformational birthing and seeding 2 decades to hopefully shift humanity into greater love and wisdom. That's the goal of Pluto. Neptune entered Aries a few months ago, earlier in 2025. And if you think about Neptune, is one of the large planets, and it's associated with bliss and the spiritual path, but it's also associated with delusion and lies and betrayal, things like that. On a soul level, when Neptune enters into Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, we would expect a consciousness raising as the soul of humanity moves into a new phase. However, Aries, when you think about it on the rays, and the rays are the frequencies of light that interpenetrate every aspect of life on Earth, and Aries holds the fourth ray on a soul level. So we know with Neptune entering Aries that this deepening of humanity into cosmic bliss isn't going to be easy, because the fourth ray is associated with all the conflict that comes before we get to harmony. So in order to unearth the bliss within us and greater compassion on the planet, we have to go through a battle. Yeah? And Neptune takes about 15 years to go through Aries, and it just started. So we have this deep transformational energy to bring about greater love and an emergence of a new way to the divine through conflict. They're 2 significant chapters that have begun as part of this Great Awakening. And then, just a few months ago, towards the end of May in 2025, Saturn, the planet associated with karma and how we're living our aspirations, our reality, it also entered the first sign of the zodiac, Aries. And Saturn, from an esoteric perspective, is the third ray of the Holy Mother, or greater intelligence, the intuition of the soul. And so we need support and assistance from the Holy Mothers, and we need to use our higher mind, our intuition, and we need to apply that in new and different ways. That's the Aries, in our day-to-day life, in our livelihood, in everything to do with worldly matters. So we have an opportunity to end a 7-year phase, because Saturn works in 7-year cycles, and to begin another one from May 2025. It'll take us through till, well, about 2032, I guess. Yeah, that'll be the 7 years. Now, Saturn will stay in Aries for 2 years. So 2025 and 2026 and through until the May of 2027, it's like if you're going to start a new garden, you've got to have the fork, you've got to have the garden bed, you've got to have the fertilizer, but it's not going to happen unless you put the fork in the earth and put in the hard yards. So the hard work of the new beginnings that will have karmic ramifications, that's where we are for this next couple of years. So lots of new things happening. And then the outer planet Uranus entered Gemini on the 8th of July. So we've had 3 entries in 2025 thus far. Neptune into Aries, where's our bliss? Saturn into Aries, how much hard work will we put in to change things? And then Uranus into Gemini. Now, Uranus is a transformational planet and connected to the 7th ray. And Gemini is the sign of the zodiac that governs the capacity to bridge the gap between personal self and the higher self, and to bring the reality of truth into our lives. Yes, so we have transformational energy and a need to find what is authentic truth. And Uranus has entered Gemini 8th of July, and I don't know how long it's going to be there. I'm not quite sure, can't remember. So we have a lot of different rays going on. But so far we can see 2 lots of the 4th ray. So we know there's conflict and drama. And then next year, on the 20th of June, right on the Southern Hemisphere's winter solstice, we'll have Chiron entering Taurus. Now, we don't know what ray Chiron works with, but I'm inclined to think that there's a bit of 4th ray energy with Chiron, because it tends to help things that aren't working in our lives to fall apart so that we can remake them in a new and better version. So Chiron enters into Taurus, and Taurus has got a great deal to do with livelihood and shelter and money and the ability to sort of live and function on a physical level. But on an esoteric level, Taurus is associated with the 1st ray. Yeah? So there's the 1st ray again. So we know that in order to heal, and Chiron's all about healing, in order to heal our separative issues between us and the divine, something powerful needs to force a new direction. That's the 1st ray energy. So if you look at this couple of years from the beginning of 2024 through till the middle of 2026, you can see the 1st ray that says out with the old and seeding for the new. And then we can see at least 2 lots of 4th ray, and I'm inclined to think that Chiron also holds the 4th ray energy. So a lot of conflict and an aspiration to get towards harmony. Yes, and then on the 28th of July next year, the transiting nodes, and these are imaginary points as the moon crosses the ecliptic, they enter the signs of Leo and Aquarius. And what happens with the nodes is that we have the south node in Leo and the north node in Aquarius. And the nodes and the nodes move backwards through the zodiac. But what we have again here is the south node is a habitually comfortable position for the ego, and that brings in the 1st ray energy on its lowest vibration, which is about power and control. Whereas the north node is an aspiration or a goal or direction for the soul, and that therefore brings in the esoteric energy of the 2nd ray. So the soul of humanity is striving for love and wisdom, and we can see that with Pluto, and we can see it with the nodes. But we have great resistance with strong will, and that could be our own will, it could be politicians, it could be world bodies, but we have power issues at play, and we have a lot of conflict. So I just thought I'd mention what the outer planets are doing during this couple of year period, because it seems to me that there are so many changes and it's moving us into this new vibration, new frequency. And the opportunity for evolution and awakening and for the soul to sort of move forward on its path. Okay. And remembering we have talked about before that we're at the end of the great year, you know, the 26,000 year and the beginning of the next great year. So it's great cosmic cycles that are unfolding, and we try to understand them as much as we can from the point of view of life on Earth. Okay, let me talk about Jupiter transiting through Cancer. So the planet Jupiter has, a 12-year cycle. And that means that roughly it's 12 months in every sign of the zodiac. So it's entered into the sign of Cancer, 10th of June, and it'll stay there until the end of June next year. And so we think about Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter is a second ray planet of the heart. So there's that aspiration of the planet Jupiter for greater love, wisdom, greater relationship from individuals to each other as equals. Now, Jupiter loves being in the sign of Cancer. Astrologers, we refer to it as being in its elevation. And so we tend to get the very best when Jupiter's in Cancer, but remembering that we can only get the best according to the frequency that we're operating at. So if we're in touch with our soul, then the very best of Jupiter in Cancer is strong 6th ray and 2nd ray, idealism and devotion, commitment to a cause. Look, it could be saving the forests, it could be feeding the poor, it could be a spiritual path, but to find what your spiritual direction is and absolutely commit to that helps to bring in your soul energy. If we talk about humanity, and the soul light of humanity, well, those that have soul contact would recognize instantly we are one family, because the sign of Cancer has a great deal to do with families. Yeah. So that sense of no separation, that I walk a mile in the moccasins of whoever else that I encounter. But now this image here of Cancer, I really like it because you can see the Cancer has the crab, is the symbology of the crab. And yet this image shows the crab aspiring to move beyond, exoterically the moon, beyond the comfort, beyond the safety, beyond the security of the shell, beyond the astral body of the ocean, and to fly with the angels. But it's not very easy depending upon how the individuals or the nations are using the sign of Cancer. If the individuals or nations are using the sign of Cancer exoterically, then it's very difficult to come out of the comfort zone, to come out of the shell, to move beyond the emotions and to aspire to move forwards. And there's a tendency to hark back to old habits. Yes, and that's a very Cancerian thing. And so the personality, Cancer has a few of the rays, but one of them is active intelligence. And there's a very strong focus around business and making money and getting on in the material and the tangible world, and chasing one's economic security or wealth. And there's also a tendency with the sign of Cancer, when the personality is operating from it, to be very nationalistic, to identify with one's tribe, one's group, and to hang around that familiar space. So it's difficult, if the soul's not present, to access the higher vibration of Jupiter in Cancer. So it's really up to the aspirants and those with soul contact on Earth to generate that energy of we are one family, one humanity, and that what's good for me must be good for others, and vice versa. Okay, I want to talk about the tests of compassion, and that's because we see the Leo energy strong with the energy of love and wisdom. We see Neptune, the planet, to do with compassion in Aries. And I sort of was reminded of this saying from the Bible. Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And to me, that's really, that kind of says it all. Treat other people as you would like to be treated yourself. Remove divisions between us and them. Recognize that we are one humanity. Walk a mile in the shoes of somebody else and see what that feels like. And often we don't get a chance to have that happen until we have a crisis in our life in one way or another. And all of a sudden we begin to appreciate what it's like to not have a home, to not have money, to not have good health. And we learn to walk a mile in the shoes of could be friend or strangers and their suffering. Yeah, so that's the goal for humanity. That's the message. Now, esoterically, we talk about the 3 decans. In every sign of the zodiac, there are 30 degrees. And the 0 to 10, that's the first decan, 10 to 20, second decan, third decan, 20 to 30 degrees. So at the moment, here we are in October 2025, Jupiter's in the 3rd decan and will stay there until the 2nd week of January next year. Now, the 3rd decan is associated and has a correlation with the planet Neptune. So there's that theme and that message of compassion and spiritual aspirations and recognizing that we are one unit of something larger and greater and more divine, whatever you might call that to be. And then, so what have we got? For about 4 months until the 2nd week of January, we need to be in this Neptune phase. And then the 3rd decan will come back again for a shorter period from early in May until the end of June. What's that, about 6 or 7 weeks, something like that? So the question is, and so this is calling upon and magnetizing the energy of Neptune, which you remember moved into Aries earlier in 2025. But Neptune has its highest and its lowest vibration. So we want to know, well, am I able to respond to the highest vibration of Neptune, and that's compassion and its sensitivity and its music and its silence and its spiritual practices? Or am I tuning in to the lower vibration, which is illusion and betrayal and confusion and denial and hiding and addictions? So questions to ask ourselves. What is the measure of our own altruism? So we can have altruism, but because of where Saturn is, we need to walk our talk. So we have to bring our reality and our aspirations together. Because Neptune has a great deal to do with compassion, a good question to ask ourselves, who or what needs to be forgiven? Am I beating myself up for something that I need to forgive myself for? Is there someone in my past I haven't forgiven? Questions to ask ourselves. If we don't have a connection to a higher path or a place of devotion, then ask yourself, what inspires you? What is it that would encourage you to be the best version of yourself and connect with the divine within and the divine without? Examine the role of faith in your life, because these are ways to find inner peace and equanimity. Remembering the 4th ray energy, which is throwing us around like a boat on a stormy sea over the next couple of years with that 4th ray energy strong. And the other thing that I wouldn't be surprised that's happening while Neptune moves through Aries over this next 14 years is that there will be the rebirth of highly developed souls who have a particular role to play in the unfolding revelations on Earth. So I think there'll be a new phase of cosmic revelation, and that could be through highly initiated souls taking birth, or it could be that well, I don't know, maybe the scientists will finally discover and prove that the soul exists. There may be some merger between the spiritual and the scientific, as the ancients have always known. Yes, so let's focus upon the Neptune energy. Okay, now let's apply this to what's been going on in the Middle East and the Gaza supposed peace plan. I heard something on the radio, or someone said the other day, we're talking about the ceasefire, and the definition of the ceasefire from the Zionist perspective was, well, you cease your activity and I'll fire. And it's shocking, but entirely plausible that what we have is a temporary ceasefire. Is it temporary for a day, 2 days, a week? Is everybody ceasing their fire? Does it have any relationship to ongoing peace? Okay, let's have a look at the chart. So what I have here is the time, 12:49. Oh, look at that, Chandra's made a mistake. Damn. I've got a mathematical error there. I've got Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, but I haven't changed it to the right zone, which simply means that the angles will be out. Yes, but I'll tell you what I noticed in the chart. It would have been good if I'd noticed the time zone problem before. Okay, well, 2 planets in Scorpio, Mercury and Mars, Saturn in Pisces, and the destiny point, the North Node in Pisces, and sometime during that day in Egypt, no, it would have been at 10 to 1, the moon was in Cancer, and they formed this, let me get my pointer, they formed the water grand trine. You can see the big blue triangle. Yeah. Now, because I have the time zone wrong, the moon might have fallen in a different part of the circle, might not have been up the top. But we still would have had the grand trine in water in Egypt at the time of signing. Yeah. This is a lot of planets in the water grand trine and watery planets. We have Neptune's a water planet, the moon's a water planet. It's water sign here, Mercury and Mars. And the energy of water, like the human body, what is it, 80% made up of water? Humanity can't function without the water energy. And astrologically, the water energy is the emotional rapport. It's the sensitivity to others. It's being human. Yeah? And of course, what's happened, and so there's been a coming together for the Palestinian people as some of the hostages have been released and they've been brought back to family, and similarly for some of the Palestinians. So an arrival back to home and a sense of connection with loved ones is very strongly part of the water grand trine. But the problem, of course, is that there's no home to go back to. There are no houses, there's hardly any water, there's hardly any food, there's no infrastructure. The Palestinian homeland, which is so connected to the sign of Cancer, with Jupiter in Cancer and the moon in Cancer, it's a wasteland. So, this is a water grand trine where someone's turned the tap off. It's very, very difficult energetically. Other things to see is the cardinal T-square. Now, this cardinal T-square is the sun in Libra, which is meant to bring justice. Yeah, but on the worldly or the exoteric level, often what Libra does is marks time and vacillates somewhere in the middle, but doesn't necessarily bring justice. So we're meant to have justice, we're meant to have homeland, homecoming, and we're meant to have a new beginning. Yeah? But unfortunately, the downside of this cardinal T-square, the way I read it, is a supposed peace plan, a supposed ceasefire, which is really just a pause, with healing that is still so much healing that needs to happen in order for a new beginning, and the possibility of a land grab, remembering that Jupiter in Cancer, in its lowest vibration, the personality wants to make money, wants to do business, wants to have territorial or nationalistic acquisition. So I look at that cardinal T-square and I think, well, all very well and good if you've got a disciple utilising it, then there'd be some justice and there'd be true homecoming and the opportunity for true beginnings. But, it doesn't appear that way. And it appears to me that underneath the pause is the long-term plan for the land grab. other things to see in the chart is the air. Well, it's an air Earth. There's Uranus in Gemini, 0 degrees Gemini, in an out of sign trine to Venus at the end of Virgo, and a trine to Pluto. Now, normally speaking, if you had a grand trine like that, you'd expect wonderful communication, wonderful, I can hear you and you can hear me, and together we can network and we can put our heads together and find good ideas for the day-to-day living. That's the Venus in the end of Virgo, of those people who are in need. And I guess I saw that in the attempts over the last couple of months for the Gaza flotilla to try and bring the aid and to try and highlight the issue of what was happening in Palestine. And I know that even though a lot of those people were thrown in jail, there was a second wave of boats that were coming. So I see the global response and an attempt to make a statement connected to that air grand trine. But again, it depends on who's using the air grand trine. If an air grand trine is being utilised by the ego, well, we can make up all kinds of lies and put them out through a megaphone to justify the ends. Whoops, I've gone away from what I wanted. Maybe that was the, oh yes, yeah, we can put our version of the truth and manipulate or distort the truth for our own ends. Now, what concerns me about the outer planet Pluto with the trine to Uranus is the tendency for technocracy to be the solution. Yeah. And I'm very concerned about Gaza being a prototype for a technocratic outdoor prison. I mean, Palestine's been an outdoor prison for goodness knows how long, how many decades. But now we have the AI and now we have the technocrats in charge, and they've combined their money with the governments. And so I say, okay, well, the Air Grand Trine can operate with humanitarian organisations and the world community crying out enough, but it can also be, the way I look at it, is that those in control who want to manipulate the message and power will use technocracy for their own ends. Okay, some of the things to see there. And of course, most everybody would have seen these kind of images. This is the homeland that the Palestinian people have come back to. I heard the figure 87% of Gaza has been destroyed. Now, I have very strong Cancerian energy, but I've also got a lot of Sagittarius. And so I've kind of vacillated between doing a lot of travel versus, you know, looking for home. And for the Palestinian people who were forced to walk and to march towards Egypt, driven out of their home, and then they have to turn around and come back. But what do they come back to? You know, the most basic thing, like having a tent or having a well with water in it, or having food without it being manipulated or used as a method of coercion. You know, and I've heard some people say it's going to take decades and decades and decades for the Palestinian people to come back to any semblance of home. Yes, and as I said, I'm quite concerned about Gaza being the prototype for a smart city. Now, we've had the smart city concept being rolled out over the last decade or more, I think. And of course, the SMART stands for the surveillance that came out of the military and the technology that's connected to that. But they have an opportunity to enforce this. And this is not just some, you know, radical sort of left of centre view. This has actually been happening for the last 2 years while the genocide has been taking place, is that the deprivation and the mass murder has been integrally linked to the collecting of data for the individuals. Okay, so this chart that I've done here, and this time I've done it for the right place in Gaza, and I've done this for the 23rd of June. What's that? Next week. Yeah. And I just thought I'd do that to see what's coming up because, the way it's been announced on the media, this is the best peace plan, it's the greatest ceasefire, blah, blah, blah. But if I look at the chart in a week's time, I can still see the water grand trine. Now, as I said, I have a lot of Cancer. I've got 2 planets in Cancer. I've got Cancer rising. I've got the South Node in Cancer. I looked at that and I just thought it reminded me of the Palestinians in a fetal position. This is what happens when basic nurturing and human kindness is lacking, is that we go into fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. So when you are suffering and there's no food and no water, well, you can't fight and you can't run away, and that leaves freeze, which is what I look at, and I see this and I think this is the Palestinian people in a, like a deer in the headlights, frozen in suffering. And that's Saturn and Neptune and Jupiter's involved and Mars and Mercury and the moon. So some people might say, fantastic homecoming, fantastic reunion. And I'm certain it is a fantastic reunion, but it's also got this fetal position and this frozen energy locked in grief. So this is generational trauma that is all locked in. Very, very difficult. Other things to see next week is the fixed T-square. Okay, now the fixed T-square is there because the Sun leaves Libra and moves into Scorpio and squares Pluto. Now, I've been very interested in Pluto moving into early Aquarius, not the least of which is because my Sun in Aquarius is 0 degrees Aquarius. And so I'm very sensitively tuned to that Sun-Pluto square. Okay, but if you look at from the Palestinians' perspective next week, we say, well, this is caught in the crosshairs. The Sun and Pluto is like being under the thumb of a dictator, under the heel of a Nazi boot, under the lens of a Zionist, data collecting. I mean, the Zionists have been counting the amount of food that each Palestinian needs for basic survival for decades and meting it out. And nothing's changed. Yeah. So the media will tell us that there's a ceasefire, but actually what's happening is that the genocide that the IDF have been perpetrating has simply been outsourced to militia squads, so that on the surface it looks like the Zionists have stepped back. But the murder's still there, the genocide, the starvation's still there. The Rafah Gate opened for 24 hours and then shut again. 40 or 50 trucks came in on the first day and then they shut them again. And why? It's because they can't count the right bodies that are handed over. This is very Sun Pluto. Yeah, this is being completely controlled and dominated so that one goes into a fetal frozen position. Yeah, so I see the fetal frozen position and I see the power of the regime. And of course, because Pluto in Aquarius has a great deal to do with the use or the misuse of technology over the next 20 years, and we've only been witnessing this for, well, a bit more than 18 months, since January last year when Pluto moved into Aquarius. And as I said, I'm a good example because what do they say? If you put a canary in a coal mine, they'll tell you when there's a problem. Well, because of my health sensitivities, my capacity to be compromised like the canary in the coal mine because of the rollout of the digital has just gone through the roof in the last 18 months. So I can only imagine what it would be like. And I have freedom of movement, I have food, I have shelter, I have friends, I have nurture, but I'm still extremely impacted by technology. Yeah. So I have a tiny, tiny understanding of the ramifications of the rollout of technology as a weapon for harm. And that's what I see, and that's what concerns me with this homecoming of the Palestinians. Okay, and just over this next week, we have Chiron hanging around the Earth. The Chiron probably for about a fortnight, I think, maybe last week, this week, and up until about 7 days' time, Chiron hangs around the planet Earth, which is in Taurus. Now, Taurus is to do with, I mean, we've all seen it during the supposed pandemic, you know, the supermarket shelves emptied. You can't buy bread, you can't get eggs, you can't get this, you can't get that. Yeah. We've had a tiny, tiny taste of what it's like to not have access to food. Yeah? But we don't really know what it's like here in the West, here in Australia, to not have access to water or shelter or hospitals or schools or government aid. Most people don't. Yeah? But this is the reality for the Palestinian people at the beginning of their homecoming. Okay, now by January 2026, so what's that, a couple of months away, 2 months, 2.5 months, something like that. You see Mars sitting here in Scorpio. It'll take until the 10th of January for Mars to transit up and get on top of Pluto. And as I said, I'm very switched on to the capacity for the digital technology to create harm. And I don't like the look of this at all. So I'm concerned that by January 2026, the Palestinian people will be locked within their digital prison. Yeah. And not just the Palestinian people, anyone who wants to travel anywhere. Yeah. The digital prison and the walls of the digital prison are dropping step by step by step all around the planet. And I'm sure that no one will experience this with the greatest suffering than the Palestinian people, because it's part of the misuse of power. Okay, an unpleasant topic for discussion. And of course, you know, those in power have been proudly bragging and espousing what their plan is. Yeah? Well, we have Tony Blair, who's supposed to be heading the new Palestinian, whatever they're calling it. We have the Riviera of Gaza that was outlined by Donald Trump and continues to be talked about. And we have this incarceration of the most cruelly treated people as they roll out and prototype the smart city, or with some other spin being put. Whether it takes them a decade or two to get it looking like this, who knows? But I'm absolutely certain that the digital prison is being built and has been built from, you know, basically January 2024. Okay, so I wanted to talk now a little bit about the digital identity and the rollout of biometric data in various countries and how this sets up the global surveillance system. And I don't think it's going to take 20 years, but it certainly started in 2024 because, of course, it's not just in a war zone this is happening. It's step by slippery step. And each step that occurs, we become used to it, normalised. So, you know, somewhere after the Second World War, well, then we had to have papers to verify who we are. It was 1985 when the Australian government tried to roll out the Australia card. And the general populace went, no way, forget it, we're not having it. So instead, a few years later, they rolled out, starting with the banks and then with the governments, the 100 points verification system. And of course, we say, okay, well, we need some kind of verification to function in the modern world. In the modern world, seems innocuous enough, seems harmless enough. Go forward another, decade or so, around about the 2000, and everybody's starting to get their first plastic bank card. Yeah. so that, yes, we've got cash, but we've also got plastic bank cards. Go forward another decade to 2013, and out comes out of America, I think it was, the touch screens, yeah, and devices that would allow you to use your fingerprint to recognize your identity. Yeah? By 2017, 2018, the first smartphones. So there's the word that should alert everybody. When they say smart, they mean surveillance that has previously been used by the military, that's then rolled out. I forget what the AR stands for, and the T is technology. So the smartphones are being rolled out. Yeah. And then we have this convenience of being able to function in the model world with our biometrics. You know, you can wear your smart watch. You can use the technology to make your life easier, which is the message we've been sold. But what we haven't been told is that the surveillance is tracking and tracing us. By 2018 in Australia, we went from analog to digital. So then by the time we've got 2018, we're all becoming extremely familiarised and happy to utilise all of this, except for someone like myself, the canary in the coal mine, who's harmed by it. And every step creates more harm and more harm and more harm and more of a digital prison. But because people like myself are only 3 out of 100, well, that doesn't matter. Let's continue on. By 2019, the Australian government attempted to legislate that we were not allowed access to our own money, our own cash. I forget what Zachary probably remembers. There was a limit they wanted to put on it. Oh, you can't take out, was it maybe $10,000 or something like that?
That's correct, 10,000.
Yeah, yeah. So there's the government saying, hang on a minute, you know, once upon a time a piece of paper would verify who you are, and then your plastic bank card or your 100 points of ID would. But now we're just going to stop you for reasons that are supposedly for your own safety. You're not allowed to take out your own money. And since 2019, there are countless stories of people who've been harassed and accosted trying to take their own money out of the bank. Okay, so I can't remember, Zachary would probably remember the legislation and what happened there, but I think it fell a couple of times before 2023. But in the middle of that, in 2020, all of a sudden we had a supposed pandemic, and everybody couldn't touch cash anymore, and cash is dirty, and everybody has to go to contactless payments. And they even told us what they were doing. They said it's a COVID, it's an ID, you know, and they rolled out the QR codes. Yeah. So this became normalized in 2020, 2021, 2022. You can't move unless the government says you can. You can't go here, you can't go there, you can't go to a cafe, you've got to wear a mask, you've got to carry your paper that says that you're clean. This is the ID. Yeah. This is a long way in, what is it, not even 40 years, from 85, the Australia card, to 2020. By 2023 in Australia, the government started drafting their digital ID legislation. I didn't hear anything about it then. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. 2023. Now, 2025, hang on a minute, it's become mandatory, is becoming mandatory. And this is the 10th of December. And they're starting with the thin end of the wedge, saying, oh, well, we're doing this to protect children from abuse online. We're doing it in social media with certain websites. We're doing this to protect the children. Now, any parent would give their right arm to protect their child from paedophilia or whatever it is that's happening online. But to pretend that the digital ID is just to protect children is an out-and-out lie. It's a Trojan horse. There are already plans, and it's the World Economic Forum that's blatantly told us that by 2030 we want all of this rolled out. We want the cash removed. We want the central bank digital currency in place. And what we didn't know that you know, like 5 or 6 years ago, or I didn't know, but now we're learning, is that the internet is also going to be held by a gatekeeper. So it's not enough to sign up with your provider and to have an account. You have to provide your digital ID to do the most basic things on the internet. And this is a global surveillance network that has basically been in place, or the plans for it, since probably the very first smart touch devices, 2013. And many people would say, well, it's extremely helpful. It saves them having to carry pieces of paper. You know, it's a wonderful thing. It protects the children. But I ask, at what cost? At what cost? And I find it quite curious that esoterically, the marks on one's hands and one's fingerprints, the whorls and the arches and the this and that the palmists would tell you all about, are a unique identifier on an esoteric level. And here is our unique identification, basically our biometrics, which links us to our DNA, being hijacked for surveillance and protection through governments. Creepy is what I call it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this global rollout. The World Economic Forum, I think it was, God, it's at least 7 years ago, maybe longer. They basically said by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They told everybody, this is what our plan is. The digital IDs are the centerpiece of the plan. There are various steps in the plan. And I was looking at the various steps, and because they impact me very crucially on a medical level, I'm extremely alert to them. So smart cities. Well, I think, okay, well, that's easy. Ballarat's a smart city. I can't park my car in Ballarat anymore because there are smart meters. Yeah, there are smart cities all over Australia. But as a Victorian, there's Ballarat. Yeah, so I'm already locked out of parking in Ballarat. Yep. So I can see the smart cities in Australia and I experience them personally. Telecommunications. This is part of the global rollout, as outlined by the World Economic Forum. Well, we've had mobile towers and the NBN for at least 10, 15 years, and now we have 5G. Now, the way that impacts me is that when I travel, I'm ill because I have to drive past. Most people don't feel them. So, of course, it's when you start to feel it in your privacy or your freedom or your hip pocket, then you'll go, hang on a minute, is this telecommunications, NBN towers, 5G rollout, is this a good idea? So no doubt it's already happening and has been happening in Australia for about 15 years. E-government, well, that's easy. Anyone who's ever tried to log on to the Centrelink website in the last 5 or 6 years will be harassed or offered or pushed or coerced into handing over a snapshot of your voice so that they can use it as digital ID. So that's a tick. Australia already has e-government. That's just one tiny example. You could probably think of a dozen more. Social platforms. This is the one that's being rolled out on the 10th of December, 2025 in Australia, although it's been rolled out in other places around the planet in various ways already. I'm still going through the World Economic Forum's, all the various components. E-commerce, well, they call that the two-tier authentication. So for most people, that's just a bit of a nuisance, you know. I want to pay a bill online, I want to buy something online, they want to make sure I'm not a scammer, they're going to ring my mobile. People like myself, the canaries, who don't have a mobile, can't function. I can't pay a bill, I can't do online banking, all kinds of things that I'm unable to do because I am unable to comply. Yeah. So I look at all of these and I go, every single one of these has impacted me and has narrowed the parameters of my life. Let's keep going. A humanitarian response. Now, we saw this in the Lismore floods, and no doubt it's been in other places, but I saw it firsthand in 2021 when Lismore was flooded. And in order to receive humanitarian aid, people had to provide their digital ID. They had to provide their QR code or they were not allowed in the building to get the aid. So that's an Australian tick. It's all, and most people wouldn't know this unless you've tried to access humanitarian aid in Australia. And I don't know whether it happened before 2021, but I witnessed it firsthand in Lismore. I haven't experienced that myself yet. Travel and mobility. Okay, so for most people, most Australians wouldn't even recognise that this is part of the digital prison. Yeah, but I do. I can't get in anybody else's car because they're all full of Bluetooth. Why is there Bluetooth in everyone's car? So they can keep a track of you when you're travelling. And as of September 2025, just last month, Australians were notified you can't leave the country anymore you can't leave the country to go to America or Europe. You may be able to go to other places if you haven't handed over your biometric data for your passport. Yeah? Okay, so that's a fairly new innovation coming into Australia, tick. Food and sustainability. Well, I'm impacted by the technology, and a lot of people are. You go to the supermarket, you know, there are very few tellers. You're meant to do it all yourself. You're supposed to do it with your plastic. Pretty soon it'll be your smartwatch or your fingerprint or your iris. I think it was early 2025, the smart shopping trolleys were rolled out in Woolworths in Melbourne. Now, I'm impacted with this technology every single time I try to shop. Maybe I can go and shop and come home well, maybe not. For most people, it just doesn't affect them at all. Yeah? So I know definitely food and sustainability, what happens with the digital ID. Financial services, well, most people are realising the banks are closing. You can't go into the ANZ in Daylesford's closed, for instance. You're put through the mill if you want to take your own money out. The purpose of this is to force everybody into the normalisation of digital money. Why would they want to do this? Because then we can be tracked and surveilled and traced and controlled. And of course, anybody in Victoria who lived through the pandemic knew how much control and surveillance operated. So I haven't been able to go into a bank for years because they're all full of Wi-Fi, and I can no longer do internet banking because they want to authenticate who I am. So I understand what it's like with the digital warfare coming into the banking system. Healthcare, well, of course, COVID, you know, you're either clean, you've had the vaccine or you haven't, you've got the code or you haven't, you're dirty or you're unclean. What does this remind us of? It reminds us of the yellow star, reminds me of the yellow star on the shoulder of the Jewish people in Nazi Germany. So every single one of these aspirational goals of the World Economic Forum have been rolling out, with the exception of the social platforms in Australia, and the social platforms are coming in 5 weeks' time. There's their plan. That's straight from the World Economic Forum. This is the cities, the telecommunications, the government, yeah. And the way it's justified and the way it's sold to humanity is it's convenient, it's safe, we're protecting you from thieves, and we're making the world accessible to poor people. I'm sorry, nothing could be further from the truth. I had a bit of a look to see how many countries on the planet have thus far rolled out digital ID. Everybody knows about China, yeah? China's perfected the art of it. I saw a horrific 5-minute video clip a few days ago which showed primary school children having their irises scanned in order to go through a turnkey type gate to go into kindergarten. And the video went on from there. But they've perfected it. Singapore, Vietnam, both North and South Korea, India, Russia, I discovered, only asks for digital ID from visitors, not from the Russians. So I thought, I'm with the Russians. Israel is the most surveilled, the most digital nation on earth. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, again, only the visitors, Iran, Turkey, Japan. In Europe, 15 countries. The Scandinavian countries have led the way with that. United Kingdom has just brought the rule in last month. No digital ID, you can't work. Well, I experienced that. I was sacked from a job because I didn't have a capacity to operate digitally 15 years ago. So this is, so as I say, I understand it because I'm the canary in the coal mine, but it's coming into the United Kingdom, and people have been on the streets and raising hell, and the Scots are, but whether they can get past it, I don't know. Apparently about 50% of the states in the US already have digital ID, with Texas being the last one to fall today, I think, in Costa Rica. And I learned today that New Zealand brought in digital ID last year. Yeah? So Australia's getting on the bandwagon relatively late when you consider how far it's already been rolled out. Some people might say, well, it's inevitable. I'm not so sure. So the Australian e-safety law, which is the thin edge of the wedge where they say, okay, we're protecting the children, is for Instagram and Facebook and Google and TikTok and Snapchat and X. Yeah, that's all what's rolling out on the 10th of December. But I discovered that eBay has had this digital ID since March 2023. Now, thus far, it's not mandatory. It's offered to you. And I discovered that because I tried to buy something on eBay, and up came the thing saying, oh, give us your biometric data. Yeah? It's been there for 2.5 years. Spotify, that have taken over global music, have quietly rolled out digital ID in July 2025. Yeah? And anybody who doesn't want to hand over their digital ID will then won't be able to use Instagram, Facebook, Gmail, YouTube, the Gmail browser, Google Maps, any phones put out by Google, or their smartwatches or their cameras or their earbuds. And probably a large amount of people will just go, oh, what does it matter? I've got nothing to hide. They can have my biometric data. I say be very, very careful. And of course, TikTok, Snapchat, and X. And I heard a whisper that there are some of the games that the children use, Minecraft and such like, that are also in the crosshair for the years to come, because this is the very small part of the internet where they're rolling it out. And apparently, I was listening to the e-safety commissioner, and she was saying, well, we're going to really target the under 16s in the early months. And what she didn't say was, and then we're going after anybody else. Here's an interesting quote. John Payne, the chair of the Electronic Frontiers Australia and a former member of the e-safety Trials Advisory Board, resigned in August, that's 2 months ago, over what he described as deep concerns about privacy protections. And he warned that the biometric data of millions of Australians could be harvested by tech giants under the guise of age verification. Yes. And 2026, it may well be that if you don't provide your digital ID, you can't even log on to your bank. I mean, I can log on to my bank online, but I can't make a payment without the verification. Maybe we'll have to log on to the telcos. Maybe if you're trying to rent a house, who knows what else will come. It's a slippery, slippery slope. Okay, I posted something on my social media a few days ago about this, and this was and a friend from Iceland answered, and this is what she said, and I've just changed a little bit of her phraseology because she's Icelandic. But what she said was, now we have this digital ID here in Iceland, not good. All information about citizens is on island.is.health, finance, property, bank, everything. And now we have endless thieves trying to get our digital ID, because if they get it, they have access to all your personal information and your money. I don't know when it was rolled out in Iceland, but I can remember going to Iceland 15 years ago, and I was horrified that my friend had to do an iris scan. She was giving her biometric data away to go into the local spa. It's at least 15 years ago, so I don't know how long it's been out this. My friend continues, she says, there's not a chance to put cash into the bank because you're looked at as a terrorist. You get an interrogation from the bank. Where did you get the money? Of course, this is happening in Australia as well. Also, many companies do not take cash from Icelanders. This is happening in Dalesford. There's a supermarket in Dalesford won't take cash. So fight this with every part of your being or you will be well and truly bleeped. So that's her feedback. So what do we do in the face of this global rollout? Is it inevitable? Do we just roll over? Do we go with the flow because there's nothing else? Or, so that's basically being complicit or collaborating or going into silence. Or the only other option is to claim your space and to withdraw as much as is humanly possible from the digital ID rollout, whether that means your smart devices, whatever it means. Okay, and then I have this little quote here that came from a pastor after the Second World War. And he says, then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. You could also say, if I was going to add a sentence here, I'd say, then they came for the gypsies, and I did not speak out because I was not a gypsy. Well, then they came for the disabled. Well, my illness is classified as a disability, but I did not speak out because I'm not disabled. So the theme in that statement is if it doesn't affect me, well, to hell with you. But we have Jupiter moving through Cancer. This says, what affects you affects me. What harms you harms me. So it's the letter I, the word I, in all of these statements where we bury our head in our sand. What can I do about it? Too hard, too difficult. It's not affecting me. That was from Pastor Martin Nimola. And then I saw somebody's written a few extra lines. Then they came for the Palestinians, but I did not speak out because I was not a Palestinian. Then they came for those who opposed genocide, but I did not speak out because I was not experiencing genocide. And then they came for everyone's DNA, their digital identity, and I did not speak out because I'd already surrendered. Sobering thought, and we all have to decide, oh, there, I've put in another one. Then they came for the freedom fighters, and I did not speak out because I was too scared. So we fight, we run away, or we freeze. That's the human response when there's a threat. Well, I've got Mars in Aries, I say fight. There's an author who's written some wonderful, wonderful books on the planet Earth. And one of his books, he refers to planet Earth as the Emerald Modem. His name's Richard Leviton, and he talks about Earth being a cell in the cosmic wonder. And if you're looking for some good news, I would suggest that anything that Richard Leviton has written is wonderful to dive deeply into, to enter into the magic and the majesty of Neptune in Aries. A few of the links there. Senator Alex Antic. I wish I knew what party he's with.
Liberal.
He's Liberal. Well,
Liberals from South Australia.
Very vocal, and he's had a petition out trying to sort of stop it. There are other senators as well. Interesting one here called Show Your Papers, which of course if it becomes normalised, we're in deep trouble. Sydney Morning Herald there, and there's the link to Richard Leverton. And so I'm just going to